My name is Talk-Alondra Ruiz-Hernandez. I have always been interested in the visual arts. Art is not just a hobby. I see it as an essential part of my being. I remember when I was a kid and people used to ask me, what do you want to be when you're older? I'd almost answer instantly, an artist. I was so sure, even at that age, that art was the only pathway right for me. It was either that or becoming a princess. It was a really tough choice to make at the time. Art is my way to express and communicate with others. Art is my way to understand my values and to understand myself. I'm constantly looking at patterns, seeing patterns I see being played in our society, like the interactions and subcultures such as my school, my group of friends, and my family, and how those specific groups as a functioning system relate to the rest of society. I'm interested in how people view themselves, self-examine, and interact with one another. My art is about relationships and connections. Through art, I can express my views on society and those around me. One of the issues that I consider to be very important and that affects me is the stigma attached to mental illness. I think that art can be an effective tool to bring positive awareness to this subject. My work expresses my frustrations towards myself, unable to do more, and my want for a society that puts an end to the negative views. So now I am going to read you a poem that I wrote that is a reflection of my past and a story behind my artwork. I am tired of being told to tell someone older, someone who knows better, an adult to trust, a teacher, anyone. No one seems to care, or at least they didn't care enough for her. They make a convincing mask. They sit there and pretend to know what they are doing, pretend to care, and have all the right words memorized. Except they are clueless to when things get too rough, too hard. What happens when the unexpected hits? No one knew what to do, so they gave up. Every one of them, even me. Every day of my life I spent looking at my phone, fearing yet expecting another phone call to be rushed into the hospital and say goodbye. I received too many of those calls, and every time it was the end all over again. Luckily, I never did say goodbye. She's not okay, but she's alive. I remember that when the day this all began, or at least the day it began for my naive little eyes. We grew up together, basically spending every moment of each day with each other. We had been wild kids, constantly running around, playing on the jungle gyms, and seeing who could climb the highest tree, often teased by others, saying that we acted more like boys than girls. We knew everything about each other, everything we loved and everything we hated. I knew her mother had always loved her, always cared, but she had never been able to show it in the right way. My house was her second home, and hers was mine. We'd have the best sleepovers, especially when our parents let us have them on school nights. I never knew that when I opened the door to what had seemed to be just another sleepover, it would change me forever. We were lying on my pull-out couch with my fluffy little mermaid blanket that we loved so dearly, when the words that slipped out of her mouth that I would never forget. The silence that came after was too intoxicating for either one of us to bear, but what else was there to do? How could I have not known, me of all people, her best friends? I never knew. I had always believed her lies, every single one of them. They didn't seem to be so strange. They were reasonable. She was quite talented at hiding it. Her stories were reasonable. It would have been that she had fallen from a bush, or it was a wild cat, or that she managed to hurt herself climbing away in the trees, as she always did. And I accepted each story as the truth. Suddenly I realized that it had not been a clumsy accident or an untrained cat that had given her those pink fleshy wounds. She gave them to herself. My eyes met hers. I watched her watery blue eyes and her messy blonde strands of hair resting on her face, meeting the sides of her lips. This was a girl I had never known. I could see my innocence, our childhood, sinking into the hardwood floor until it was completely gone, and it would never be able to come back. Every memory had been tainted. How could I have never known? I spent every moment with her. Had she used my knives, and I was too yet foolish to see? What if it happened in my own house, and I couldn't stop it? I was so ashamed of myself for never knowing, never paying enough attention. How was it that I was the only one who knew? Was her mother too naive to see and believed her lies as well. I convinced myself that that was the only possible reason. As I had once been, she was too naive to see. I could no longer blame her mother's silence on being naive the day that she largely carved the words hate into her arm. Everyone was silent. No one even acknowledged what had happened. No one ever did. Not only her family, but our school. They knew, and they never said anything. I held her for hours. I didn't know what she needed, except I knew it was more than a child's love and care. I was never enough, and I will never be enough. Somehow we managed to make it to high school. We both hoped that this would change things, a new start, new friends, and a new environment. I loved high school. She hated it. Everything started to spiral out of control. My life had been revolved around her. If I was not holding her or rushing her to the hospital, I was locked into my bathroom, crying, in a constant state of fear, waiting for whatever was to happen next. I knew I had to leave. And if I wasn't willing to leave, I'd be forced to leave. There were all the external reasons for moving away. It was closer to my parents' work. Who wouldn't want to live in Toronto? There's an amazing art school that has a much better program. I knew these were all the factors, but I knew that my mother would never make me leave, since she knew I already had built a life, friends, and I was in the middle of high school. But ultimately, we left because I couldn't be her entire support system anymore. I couldn't help someone who didn't want to be helped. It wasn't my responsibility, and I did everything I could, or at least that's what my family tells me. I knew they're right. I knew they had been right. I didn't have the capacity to help her, but even to this day, I can't help but feel guilty. I was just another person in her life who gave up. I was no better than her school or her family. I moved away and I gave up. So I think that if we as a community could understand that we're all connected, perhaps there would no longer be a stigma attached to mental illness. So this leads to my worries about the human connection. I fear we are forgetting the importance of the human interaction and our connection to nature. So the air particles that I'm breathing in transfer to the air particles that other people in this room are breathing in, and if you think about it in that way and sharing the particles, we're all connected to each other in this room. And furthermore, if you think about sharing the air particles, we're connected to every living being or every living thing on this planet. In our society, we value individuality and competition and forget about community. As humans, we need each other to survive, and yet we are living in a world where there isn't a balance balance of being competitive and being cooperative. We live in a world where we're taught that we're separate entities disconnected from other beings. Our society raises us with the values of gaining individual success while others fail. This photo represents someone who feels isolated, longing for the connection, and desperately reaching out. Even from her dress, there are thin threads trying to make a connection, moving out and beyond the frame of artwork. In the photo, you can see that the woman is lying down on no visible surface. She seems to be floating in space. This was meant to show that she is not grounded. The drastic shadows emphasize her loneliness in the empty space she feels surrounds her. While nature weaves its webs around her, she is too blind to see them. Instead of planning for a larger piece with multiple people, I wanted to make sure I wasn't completely erasing the idea of individuality. We all have our individual auras, which I think we should value. However, I think we should also appreciate living and coexisting with one another as well. My photography project is about people who are not only looking for the connections with others, but also the primordial connection with nature. This photo shows the attitude of gratitude of a boy who is receiving from the earth the food, the water, and the air that keeps him alive. Our planet we call Earth is where we have made our homes, a safe place to live and rest. Nonetheless, we have chosen to disrespect it and abuse it. Connections have become my main concern in life and my art-making subject. My photography project is about people who are looking for the connection with others beyond differences, beyond prejudice. So this is close to the ending of my art talks, but before I finish, I want to make sure that I spoke about my experience at ESA. I was a late addition in the visual arts family, as I only joined last year. Nonetheless, everyone accepted me as part of the family. Although in general, ESA is wonderful and has an amazing group of staff members, there are two teachers I would like to highlight, and those two would be Mr. Berry and Mr. Novak. I have never met two more generous and thoughtful individuals. When you have a conversation with these two, they do not see you just as another high school student. They see you as an individual whose ideas are worth something. They believe that each one of their students has the capacity to make something beautiful, and each one of their students can feel their support. Within the year and a half that I have been at ESA, I've learned more about myself than I have for the rest of my life. Without Mr. Berry and Mr. Novak's encouragement, I might have never been able to have the confidence to create the art that I have. They have helped me to build a foundation for my art, in which I hope to grow from. I'd also like to thank my mother, who's in this photo right now, because she is an artist, and without her, I probably wouldn't have been so involved in art, and it's always been a part of my life. And she's helped me through everything and definitely influenced my work. And to end it off, I wanted to say a quote from JR, a semi-anonymous street artist, who says, "In some ways, art can change the world. Art is not supposed to change the world, to change practical things, but it can change our perceptions. Art can change the way we see the world. Art can create energy." I truly believe that art can change the world. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my art talk. I hope you enjoyed it.